Lights are off downstairs, he mutters to Prue. I need to go down anyway, she says softly, both of them fearful of breaking the spell that exists between the child and the television set. Her face, as his face glided past it on the way to kiss another, exuded an aura, shampooey, powdery, just as the trees outside the house are yielding to the rain a leafy, fresh tree smell. This green, wet fragrance is present in his room, too, the old sewing room, where the headless dress dummy stands. He changes into the clean pajamas Janice uncharacteristically had the foresight to bring. A blooming, cottony weariness has overtaken him, enveloping him like the rain. In the narrow room, its sound is more distinct than elsewhere, and complicated. The conversation involving the porch roof, the house gutter, the echoing downspout, the yielding leaves of the maples, the swish of a passing car. Closest to him, periodic spurts of dripping between the storm window and the wooden sash suggest some leakage into the walls and an eventual trouble of rot. Not his problem. Fewer and fewer things are. The window is open a little for air, and stray droplets prick the skin of his hands as he stands a moment looking out. Mount Judge doesn't change much, at least here in the older section, but has dropped away beneath his life as if beneath a rising airplane. His life flowed along this shining asphalt, past these tilted lawns and brick-pillared porches, and left no trace. The town never knew him, the way he had imagined as a child it did, every pebble and milk box and tulip bed eyelessly watching him pass. With friendliness, but at the moment this thought is not frightening. A blurred lit window across the street displays an empty easy chair, a set of brass-headed fireplace tools, a brick mantel supporting a pair of oblivious candlesticks. Rabbit hurries in bare feet down the hall to the bathroom and back and into bed before it is 9 o'clock. At the hospital by now the last visitors would be long gone. The flurry of bathroom-going and pill-taking that followed their departure subsided. The lights and nurses' voices in the hall turned down. There is no reading lamp in his room, just a paper-shaded overhead he resists switching on. He noticed a stack of old Consumer's Digests in the closet, but figures the products they evaluated will all be off the market by now. The history book Janice gave him, that he can't get through although he is more than halfway, is back in the Penn Park den. Nor is the street light enough to read by. It projects rhomboidal ghosts of the window panes, alive with a spasmodic motion as raindrops tremblingly gather and then break downward in sudden streaks. Like the origins of life in one of those educational television shows he watches. Molecules collecting and collecting at random, and then twitched into life by lightning. Behind his head, past the old brown headboard with its jigsaw scrolls and mushroom-topped posts, his dead mother-in-law's sewing machine waits for her little swollen foot to press its treadle into life, and her short, plump fingers to poke a wetted thread through its rusted needle. About as likely that to happen as life just rising up out of molecules. A smothered concussion, distant thunder, sounds in the direction of Brewer, and the treetops stir. Harry's head is up on 2 pillows, so the full feeling in his chest is eased. His heart is giving him no pain, just floats wounded on the sea of ebbing time. Time passes, he doesn't know how much, before the door handle turns and clicks, and a slant rod of hall light stabs into the amniotic isolation of the little borrowed room. Prue's head, with coppery highlights on the top of her hair, pokes in. "You awake?" she asks in almost a whisper. Her voice seems roughened, and her face is a milky, heart-shaped shadow. "Yep," Rabbit says, "just lying here listening to the rain." "You get Judy settled?" "Finally," the young woman says, and with the exasperated emphasis enters the room wholly, standing erect. She is wearing that shorty bathrobe of hers, her legs cased in a white shadow descending to her ankles. "She's very upset about Nelson, naturally." "Naturally. Sorry I blew up at her," he says. "The last thing the poor kid needs." He pushes up on his elbows, feeling himself somehow host, his heart thundering at the strangeness, though after his days in the hospital he should be used to people seeing him in bed. "I don't know," Prue says. "Maybe it was just what she needed, a little structure. She thinks she has a right to all the TV sets in the world." "Mind if I smoke?" "Not at all." "I mean, I see the windows a little bit open, but if it doesn't," he says. "I like it. Other people smoke." Almost as good as your own. After 30 years, I still miss it. How come you haven't given it up with all this health kick? I had, Prue says. Her face in the blue-green flare of her Bic lighter, a little tube as of lipstick, looks flinty, determined, a face stripped to essentials, with a long shadow leaping across her cheek from her nose. The flame goes out. She loudly exhales. Her voice continues in the renewed shadows. Except for maybe 1 or 2 at night to keep myself from eating. But now this thing with Nelson, why not? What does anything matter? Her hovering face shows one profile, then the other. There's no place to sit in here. This is an awful room. He smells not only her cigarette smoke, but her femininity. The faint department store sweetness that clings to women, in the lotions they use, the shampoo. It's cozy, he says, and moves his legs so she can sit on the bed. I bet you were asleep, Prue says. I'll only stay for this cigarette. I just need a little adult company. She inhales like a man, deep, so the smoke comes out thin in a double jet from her mouth and nostrils, and keeps coming for several breaths. I hope putting the kids down with Nelson gone isn't such a nightmare every night. They need so much reassurance. I thought he wasn't here a lot of nights. This time of night he usually was. The action over at the laid-back doesn't begin until around 10. He'd come home from work, eat, be with the kids, and then get restless. I honestly think most nights he didn't plan to go out for a couple hits again. It just came over him, and he couldn't help himself. She takes another drag. He hears her intake, like a sigh with several levels, and remembers how it was to smoke. It was creating out of air an extension of yourself. With the kids he was helpful. However much of a shit he was to everybody else, he wasn't a bad father. Isn't. I shouldn't talk about him as if he's dead. He asks her, "What time is it, anyway?" 9:15 or so. Janice would get back at 10:30 at the earliest. There was plenty of time to see this through. He relaxes back into his pillows. Good he had that nap this afternoon. Is that how you see it, he asks. He was a shit to you? Absolutely. Terrible. Out all night doing God knows what, then this sniveling and begging for forgiveness afterwards. I hated that worse than the chasing. My father was a boozer and a chaser, but then he wouldn't whine to Mom about it. He'd at least let her do the whining. This immature dependence of Nelson's was totally outside my experience. Her cigarette tip glows. A distant concussion of thunder steps closer. Prue's presence here feels hot in Harry's mind. She is awkwardly big and all sharp angles in the sack of his consciousness. Her talk seems angular and tough, the gritty Akron toughness overlaid with the dismissive vocabulary learned from professional copers. He doesn't like hearing his son called immature. You knew him for some time out at Kent, he points out, almost hostilely. You knew what you were taking on. Harry, I didn't, she says, and the cigarette tip loops through an agitated arc. I thought he'd grow. I never dreamed how enmeshed he was with you two. He's still trying to work out what you two did to him, as if you were the only parents in the world who didn't keep wiping their kid's ass until he was 30. I tell him, get real, Nelson. Lousy parents are par for the course. My God, nothing's ideal. Then he gets sore and tells me what a cold fish I am. He means sex. A thing that goes fast with coke is shame. These women that are hooked will do anything. I say to him, you're not going to give me AIDS from one of your coke whores. Then he goes out again. It's a vicious circle. It's been going on for years. How many years, would you say? When she shrugs her shoulders, Ma's old bed shakes. More than you'd think. That crowd around Slim was always doing pot and uppers. Gays don't give a damn. They have all this money only for themselves. Maybe 2 years ago, Nelson became a big enough user on his own to need to steal. At first he just stole from us money that should have gone into the house and stuff, and then he started stealing from you, the company. I hope you send him to jail. I really do. She has been cupping her hand beneath the cigarette to catch the ash, and now she looks around for an ashtray and sees none, and finally flips the butt toward the window, where it sparks against the screen and sizzles out on the wet sill. Her voice is hoarsening and finding a certain swing, a welling up. I have no use for him anymore. I'm scared to fuck him. I'm scared to be legally associated with him. I've wasted my life. You don't know what it's like. You're a man. You're free. You can do what you want in life. Until you're 60, at least you're a buyer. A woman's a seller. She has to be. And she better not haggle too long. I'm 34. I've had my shot, Harry. I wasted it on Nelson. I had my little hand of cards and played them, and now I'm folded. I'm through. My husband hates me, and I hate him, and we don't even have any money to split up. I'm scared, so scared. And my kids are scared, too. I'm trash, and they're trash, and they know it. Hey, he has to say. Come on, nobody's trash. But even as he says it, he knows this is an old-fashioned idea he would have trouble defending. We're all trash, really. Without God to lift us up and make us into angels, we're all trash. Her sobbing is shaking the bed so badly that in his delicate post-op state he feels queasy. To quiet her big body, he reaches out and pulls her toward him. As if expecting his touch, she huddles tightly, though a blanket and a sheet are between them, and continues sobbing in a bitter lower register, her breath hot on his chest, where a pajama button has come undone. His chest. They want to carve it up. At least you're healthy, he tells her. Me, all they need to do is nail down the coffin lid. I can't run, I can't fuck, I can't eat anything I like. I know damn well they're going to talk me into a bypass. And you're scared. You're still young. You've got lots of cards still. Think of how scared I feel. In his arms, Prue says in a voice gone calm again, People have bypass operations all the time now. Yeah, easy for you to say. Like me telling you people are married to shits all the time. Or you telling me people have their kids turn out to be dope addict embezzlers all the time. A small laugh. A flash of light outside, and after some seconds, thunder. Both listen. She asks, Does Janice say you can't fuck? We don't talk about it. We just don't do it much lately. There's been too much else going on. What did your doctor say? I forget. My cardiologist's about Nelson's age. We were all too shy to go into it. Prue sniffs and says, I hate my life. She seems to him to be unnaturally still, like a rabbit in oncoming headlights. He lets the hand of the arm around her broad back move up across the bumps of the quilted robe and enter the silken cave at the nape of her neck, to toy with the warm hair there. I know the feeling, he says, content to toy, aware through the length of his body of a cottony sleepiness waiting to claim him. She tells him, You were one of the things I liked about Nelson. Maybe I thought Nelson would grow into somebody like you. Maybe he did. You don't get to see what a bastard I can be. I can imagine, she says, but people provoke you. He goes on, I see a lot of myself in the kid. The nape of her neck tingles under his fingers, the soft hairs rising to his electricity. I'm glad you're letting your hair grow long, he says. It gets too long. Her hand has come to rest on his bare chest where the button is unbuttoned. He pictures her hands with their pink-knuckled, vulnerable, raw look. She is left-handed, he remembers. The oddity of this excites him further. Not waiting too long to think about it, he, with his free hand, lifts hers from his chest and places it lower, where an erection has surprisingly sprouted from his half-shaved groin. His gesture has the pre-sexual quality of one child sharing with another an interesting discovery, a stone that moves, or a remarkably thick-bodied butterfly. Her eyes widen in the dim face inches from his on the pillow. Tiny points of light are caught in her lashes. He lets his face drift, on the tide of blood risen within him, across those inches to set their mouths together, carefully testing for the angle, while her fingers caress him in a rhythm slower than that of his thudding heart. As the space narrows to nothing, he is watchful of his heart, his accomplice in sin. Their kiss tastes to him of the fish she so nicely prepared, its lemon and chives, and of asparagus. Rain whips at the screen. The leak onto the windowsill accelerates its tapping. A brilliant, close flash shocks the air everywhere, and less than a second later a heart-stopping crack and splintering of thunder crushes the house from above. As if in overflow of this natural heedlessness, Prue says, Shit, jumps from the bed, slams shut the window, pulls down the shade, tears open her bathrobe and sheds it, and reaching down pulls her nightie up over her head. Her tall, pale, wide-hipped nakedness in the dimmed room is lovely, much as those pear trees in blossom along that block in Brewer last month were lovely. All his, it had seemed, a piece of paradise blundered upon. Incredible. Chapter 3. M.I. By mid-June the weeds have taken over. Burdock and chicory stand 3 feet tall along the stony dry shoulders of Route 111, and the struggling little yew hedge, meant to dress up the base of the Springer Motors display window, has crabgrass and purslane spreading through the rotting bark mulch, which hasn't been renewed for a couple of years. It's one of the things Harry keeps making a mental note to do. Call the landscaping service and renew the mulch and replace the dead yews. About a third of them, they look like hell, like missing teeth. Across the 4-lane highway, it's traffic thicker and faster than ever, though the state still holds to the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. The take-out restaurant called the Chuck Wagon has been replaced by a Pizza Hut, one of the 6 or so around Brewer now. What do people see in it? All those gummy wedges of dough and cheese that when you try to eat them pull long strings out in front of your face. But on Saturdays, when in the weekend mood Benny runs over and brings back an order for whoever wants it, Harry allows himself a pepperoni with peppers and onions, but no anchovies, please, like little snails stuck in the mud. Today is not Saturday, it is Monday, the day after Father's Day. Nobody sent Harry a card. He and Janice have visited Nelson twice for family therapy at this gloomy big rehab center in North Philly, full of banisters and bulletin boards and a damp mimeograph smell that reminds him of the basement Sunday school he went to. And both times it was like a quarrel around the kitchen table, only with a referee, a lean, pale, colored woman with fancy spectacles and one of these sweet church-going smiles Harry associates with the better type of Philadelphia black. They go over the old stuff, the baby's death, the mess in the 60s with Janice moving out and Jill and Skeeter moving in, the crazy way Nelson got himself married to this Kent State secretary an inch taller and a year older than he, a Catholic furthermore, and the kind of crazy way the young couple moved into the old Springer house and the older couple moved out and in fact lives half the year in Florida, all so the kid can run wild with the car agency. Harry explains how, from his point of view, Nelson's been spoiled rotten by his mother because of her guilt complex, and that's why the kid feels entitled to live in Never Never Land with all these fags and druggies and let his wife and children go around in rags. When he talks, the mocha-colored therapist's smile gets even more pious and patient, and then she turns to one of the others, Nelson or Janice or Prue, and asks them how they feel about what they've just heard, as if what he's saying isn't a description of facts, but a set of noises to be rolled into some general mishmash. All this talking through and processing therapists like to do cheapens the world's facts. It reduces decisions that were the best people could do at the time to dream moves, to reflexes that have been processed in a million previous cases like so much shredded wheat. He feels anticipated and discounted in advance, whatever he says, and increasingly aggravated, and winds up telling Janice and Prue to go next time without him. Benny comes over to where Harry stands at the window looking out and asks, "What'd you do for Father's Day?" Harry is pleased to have an answer. "Nelson's wife brought our grandchildren over in the afternoon, and I did a cookout for everybody on the outdoor grill." It sounds ideally American, but had its shaky underside. Their grill, for one thing, is a metal sphere that Consumer Reports said years ago was a classic, but that Harry never has quite the patience for. You must wait until the briquettes are gray and ashy, but he's afraid of waiting too long, so there was a lot of staring at the raw hamburger patties not cooking, with Janice annoying him by offering to cook them in the kitchen, since the children were being eaten alive by mosquitoes. For another, the grandchildren brought him cute grandfather's cards, all right, both by this new artist, Gary Larson, that everybody else thinks is so funny, but this uniformity, they were even signed by the same red pen, Judy's with quite a girlish flourish to the Y, and Roy's a bunch of aimless but intense pre-literate stabs, suggested a lack of planning, a quick stop at the drugstore on the way over from the Flying Eagle. Prue and the kids arrived with their hair wet from the pool. She brought a bowl of salad she had made at home. "Sounds terrific," Benny says in his husky small voice. "Yeah," Harry agrees, explaining, as if his image of Prue with her wet long hair holding this big wooden bowl of lettuce and sliced radishes on her hip was visible to them both. "We've arranged a temporary membership for Nelson's wife over at the country club, and they'd been swimming over there most of the day." "Nice," Benny says. She seems a nice gal, Teresa. Never came over here to the lot much, but I hate to see a family like that having a hard time. They're managing, Harry says, and changes the subject. Did you watch any of the Open? Somebody really should go out and pick up all the wrappers that blow over from the Pizza Hut and get caught in the struggling little yew-hedge. But he doesn't like to bend over and doesn't quite feel he can order Benny to do it. "No, I can't get turned on by games," the pudgy young sales representative says, more aggressively than the question requires. "Even baseball, a game or two, I'm bored. You know, what's in it for me? So what, if you follow me?" There used to be a stately old maple tree across Route 111 that the Pizza Hut cut down to expand its red-roofed facility. The roof is shaped like a hat with two slants. He ought to be grateful, Harry thinks, to have a lively business along this struggling little strip. "Well," he tells Benny, not wanting to argue, "with the Phils in last place, you aren't missing much. The worst record in baseball, and now they've traded away two of their old all-stars, Bedrosian and Samuel. There's no such thing as loyalty anymore." Benny continues to explain himself unnecessarily. "Me, I'd rather do something myself on a nice Sunday, not sit there like a couch potato, you know what I mean? Get outdoors with my little girl at the neighbor's pool, or go take the family for a walk up the mountain if it's not too hot, you know? These people who keep saying you know, as if they don't keep nailing your attention to their words, it'll drift off." "That's the way I used to be," Harry tells him, relaxing as the disturbing image of Prue holding the great bowl on her hip recedes, and feeling philosophical and pleasurably melancholic the way he usually does, gazing out this big window. Above his head, the big blue paper banner spelling Toyota Rama backwards with the sun shining through it is beginning to come unstuck from the glass. Always doing some sport as a kid, and up until recently out on the golf course, flogging the stupid ball. "You could still do that," Benny says, with that Italian huskiness, faintly breathless. "In fact, I bet your doc advises it. That's what mine advises, exercise, you know, for my weight." "I probably should do something," Harry agrees, "to keep the circulation going. But I don't know, golf suddenly seemed stupid. I realized I'd never get any better at it at this point. And the guys I had my old foursome with have pretty well moved away. It's all these blonde, beefy yuppie types up at the club, and they all ride carts. They're in such a fucking hurry to get back to making money, they ride around in carts wearing the grass off the course. I used to like to walk and carry. You'd strengthen your legs. That's where the power of a golf swing is, believe it or not, in the legs. I was mostly arms. I knew the right thing to do. I could see it in the other guys and the pros on TV, but I couldn't make myself do it." The length and inward quality of this speech makes Benny uneasy. "You ought to be getting some exercise," he says, "especially with your history." Rabbit doesn't know if he means his recent medical history or his ancient history of high school athletics. The framed blow-ups of his old basketball photos have come out of Nelson's office and back onto the walls, rose-colored though they are, above the performance board. That was something he did carry through on, unlike the rotting bark mulch. Angstrom hits for 42. "When Schmidt quit, that got to me," he tells Benny, even though the guy keeps saying he is no sports nut. Maybe he enjoys bullying him with it, boring him. He wonders how much Benny was in on Nelson's shenanigans, but didn't have the heart or energy to fire him when he came back to run the lot. Get through the day and the cars sell themselves, especially the Camry and Corolla. Who could ask for anything more? All he had to do, he explains to Benny, to earn another $500,000 was stay on the roster until August 15th. And he began the season like a ball of fire, 2 home runs the first 2 games, coming off that rotator cuff surgery. But, like Schmidt himself said, it got to the point where he'd tell his body to do something and it wouldn't do it. He knew what he had to do and couldn't do it, and he faced the fact, and you got to give him credit. In this day and age, he put honor over money. 8 errors, Elvira Ullenbach calls in her deep voice from over in her booth, on the wall toward Paraguay, where she has been filling out the bill of sale and NV1 for an ivory Corolla LE she sold yesterday to one of these broads that come in and ask to deal with her. They have jobs, money, even the young ones that used to be home making babies. If you look more and more, you see women driving the buses, the delivery trucks. It's getting as bad as Russia. Next thing, we'll have women coal miners. Maybe we already do. The only difference between the 2 old superpowers is they sell their trees to Japan in different directions. An error each in the last 2 games against the Giants, Elvira inexorably recites. And hitting .203, just 2 hits his last 41 at-bats. Her head is full between her pretty little jug ears with figures. Her father was a sports addict, she has explained, and to communicate with him she followed all this stuff and now can't break the habit. Yeah, Rabbit says, he feels weakly, taking some steps toward her desk, but still it took a lot of style. Just a week ago, did you see, there was this interview in some Philadelphia paper where he said how great he felt, and he was only in a slump like an overeager kid? Then he was man enough to change his mind, when all he had to do was hang around to collect $1.5 million total. I liked the way he went out, Rabbit says, quick and on his own nickel. Elvira, not looking up from her paperwork, her pendulous gold earrings bobbing as she writes, says, "They would have cut him by August the way he was going. He spared himself the humiliation." Exactly, Harry says, still weakly, torn between a desire to strike an alliance with this female and an itch to conquer her, to put her in her place. Not that she and Benny have been difficult to deal with, docile rather, as if anxious that they not be swept out of the lot along with Lyle and Nelson. It was easiest for Harry to accept them as innocents and not rock the agency worse than it was being rocked. Both of them have connections in Brewer and move Toyotas, and if the conversations during idle time, downtime young people called it now, weren't as satisfying, as clarifying as those he used to have with Charlie Stavros, perhaps the times were less easy to clarify. Reagan left everybody in a daze, and now the communists were acting confused too. "How about those elections in Poland?" he says. "Voting the party out? Whoever would have thought we'd live to see the day? And Gorby telling all the world the contractors who put up those sand castles in Armenia were crooks? And in China, what's amazing isn't the crackdown, but that the kids were allowed to run the show for a month and nobody knew what to do about it. It's like nobody's in charge of the other side anymore. I miss it," he says, "the Cold War. It gave you a reason to get up in the morning." He says these things to be provocative, to get a rise out of Benny or Elvira, but his words drift away like the speech of old people on the porches when he was a boy. Not for the first time since returning to the lot does he feel he is not really there, but is a ghost being humored. His words are just noises. In Nelson's old office and the office next to it where Mildred used to be, the accountant Janice has hired on Charlie's advice is going through the books, a task so extensive he has brought a full-time assistant. These two youngish men who dress in gray suits of which they hang up the jackets when arriving, putting them on again when they depart, feel like the real management of the firm. "Elvira," he says, always enjoying pronouncing her name, "did you see this morning in the paper where 4 men were charged with a felony for chaining themselves to a car in front of an abortion clinic? And with contributing to the delinquency of a minor since they had a 17-year-old boy along?" He knows where she stands, pro-choice. All these independent bimbos are. He takes a kind of pro-life tilt to gall her, but his heart isn't really in it, and she knows it. She leaves her desk and comes striding toward him, thrillingly thin, holding the completed NV1s, her wide-jawed little head balanced with its pulled-back shiny brown hair on her slender neck, her dangling big earrings shaped like Brazil nuts. He retreats a step, and the three of them stand together at the window, Harry between them and a head taller. "Wouldn't you know," she says, "it would be all men? Why do they care so much? Why are they so passionate about what some women they don't even know do with their bodies?" "They think it's murder," Harry says. "They think the fetus is a little separate person from the morning after on." His way of putting it feeds into her snort of disgust. "Tchah! They don't know what they think," she says. "If men could get knocked up, this wouldn't even be a debate. Would it, Benny?" She is bringing him in to dilute whatever Harry is trying to do to her with this provocative topic. Benny says carefully, huskily, "My church says abortion is a sin." "And you believe them until you want to do it, right? Tell us about you and Maria. You use birth control? 70% of young married Catholics do, you know that?" A strange aspect of his encounter with Prue, Harry remembers, had been the condom she had produced out of the pocket of her shorty bathrobe. Either she always kept one there or had foreseen fucking him before coming into the room. He wasn't used to them, not since the army, but went along with it without a protest. It was her show. The thing had been a squeeze. He had been afraid he couldn't keep up his own pressure against it, and his pubic hair, where he had some left after the angioplasty, the way they shaved him, got caught at the base in the unrolling. A little practical fussing there. She helped in the dim light. It maybe had made him slower to come. Not a bad thing, as she came twice, under him once, and then astraddle, rain whipping at the window behind the drawn shade, her hips so big and broad in his hands he didn't feel fat himself. her tits a-twitter as she jiggled in pursuit of the second orgasm, he near to fainting with worry over juggling his defective heart. A certain matter-of-fact shamelessness about Prue reduced a bit the poetry of his first sight of her naked and pale like that street of blossoming trees. She did it all, but was blunt about it and faintly wooden, as if the dressmaker's dummy in the dark behind him had grown limbs and a head with swinging carrot-colored hair. To keep his prick up, he kept telling himself, "This is the first time I've ever fucked a left-handed woman." Benny is blushing. He's not used to talking this way with a woman. "Maybe so," he admits. "If it's not a mortal sin, you don't have to confess it unless you want to." That saves the priest a lot of embarrassment, Elvira tells him. Suppose no matter what you two use, Maria kept getting knocked up, what would you do? You don't want that precious little girl of yours to feel crowded. You can give her the best the way things are. What's more important, quality of life for the family you already have, or a little knot of protein the size of a termite? Benny has a kind of squeaking girlish voice that excitement can bring out. "Lay off, Ellie. Don't make me think about it. You're offending my religion. I wouldn't mind a couple more kids. What the hell? I'm young." Harry tries to help him out. "Who's to say what's the quality of life?" he asks Elvira. "Maybe the extra kid is the one that's going to invent the phonograph. Not out of the ghetto, he isn't. He's the kid that mugs you for crack money 16 years later." "You don't have to get racist about it," Harry says, having been mugged in a sense by a white kid, his own son. "It's the opposite of racist. It's realistic," Elvira tells him. "It's the poor black teenage mother whose right to abortion these crazy fundamentalist jerks are trying to take away." "Yeah," he responds, "it's the poor black teenage mother who wants to have the baby because she never had a doll to play with, and she loves the idea of sticking the taxpayer with another welfare bill. Up yours, Whitey. That's what the birth statistics are saying." "Now who's sounding racist?" "Realistic, you mean." Relaxed in the aftermath of love and grateful to be still alive, he had asked Prue how queer she thought Nelson was, with all this palling around with Lyle and Slim. Her breath, in the watery light from the window, was made visible by fine jets of inhaled cigarette smoke as she thoughtfully answered, only a little taken aback by the question. "No, Nelson likes girls. He's a mama's boy, but he takes after you that way. They just look bigger to him than to you." Coming into the room less than an hour later, Janice had sniffed the cigarette smoke, but he had pretended to be too sleepy to discuss it. Prue took the second butt away with the condom, but the first one, drowned over on the windowsill, was by next morning so saturated and flattened it could have been there for ages, a historical relic of Nelson and Melanie. Rabbit sighs and says, "You're right, Elvira. People should have a choice, even if they make bad ones." From the room he was in with Prue, his mind moves to the one he had shared with Ruth, one flight up on Summer Street, and the last time he saw it. She told him she was pregnant and called him Mr. Death, and he begged her to have the baby. "Have it? Have it, you say? How? Will you marry me?" She mocked him, but pleaded too, and in the end, yes, to be realistic, probably did have the abortion. "If you can't work it out, I'm dead to you. I'm dead to you, and this baby of yours is dead too." That nurse with the round face and sweet disposition in St. Joseph's had nothing to do with him, just like Ruth told him the last time he saw her, in her farmhouse 10 years ago. He had had one daughter, and she died. God didn't trust him with another. He says aloud, "Schmidt did what Rose is too dumb to. Quit when you've had it. Take your medicine. Don't prolong the agony with all these lawyers." Benny and Elvira look at him, alarmed by how his mind has wandered. But he enjoys his sensation of internal roaming. When he first came to the lot as chief sales rep after Fred Springer had died, he was afraid he couldn't fill the space. But now, as an older man, with his head so full of memories, he fills it without even trying. Through the plate glass he sees a couple in their 30s, maybe early 40s. Everybody looks young to him now, out on the lot among the cars, stooping to peek into the interiors and at the factory sticker on the windows. The woman is plump and white and in a halter top showing her lardy arms, and the man darker, much darker. Hispanics come in all these shades, and skinny, in a grape-colored tank top cut off at the midriff. Their ducking heads move cautiously, as if afraid of an Indian ambush out in the prairie of glittering car roofs, a pioneer couple in their way, at least in this part of the world where the races don't much mix. Benny asks Elvira, "You want 'em or do I?" She says, "You do. If the woman needs a little extra, bring her in and I'll chat her up. But don't aim it all at her just because she's white. They're both going to be miffed if you snub the man." "What do you think I am, a bigot?" Benny says mock-comically. But his demeanor is sad and determined as he walks out of the air-conditioning into the June humidity and heat. "You shouldn't ride him about his religion," Harry tells Elvira. "I don't. I just think that damn Pope he's got ought to be put in jail for what he does to women." Peggy Fosnot, Rabbit remembers, before she had a breast cut off and then Upton died, had been wild with anger toward the Pope. Anger is what gives you cancer, he has read somewhere. If you've been around long enough, he reflects, you've heard it all. The news and the commentary both, churned like the garbage in a disposal that doesn't drain. The media every night trying to whip you up into a frenzy so you'll run out and buy all the depressing stuff they advertise. Laxatives and denture adhesive cream, Fixodent and Sominex and Tylenol and hemorrhoid medicine and mouthwash against morning mouth. Why does the evening news assume the people who watch it are in such decrepit, plugged-up shape? It's enough to make you switch the channel. The commercials revolt him, all that friendly jawing among these folksy cracker-barrel types about rectal itching and burning, and the one of the young, old, beautiful woman in soft focus, stretching so luxuriously in her white bathrobe because she's just taken a shit, and all those people in the X-Lax ad saying good morning one after the other, so you can't help picturing the world filling up with our smiling American excrement. We'll have to pay the poor third-world countries to dump it pretty soon, like toxic waste. Why pick on the Pope, Harry asks. Bush is just as bad, anti-choice. Yes, but he'll change when the women start voting Republicans out. There's no way to vote the Pope out. Do you ever get the feeling, he asks her, now that Bush is in, that we're kind of on the sidelines, that we're sort of like a big Canada, and what we do doesn't much matter to anybody else? Maybe that's the way it ought to be. It's a kind of relief, I guess, not to be the big cheese. Elvira has decided to be amused. She fiddles with one of her Brazil nut earrings and looks up at him slantwise. You matter to everybody, Harry, if that's what you're hinting at. This is the most daughterly thing she has ever said to him. He feels himself blush. I wasn't thinking of me. I was thinking of the country. You know who I blame? The old Ayatollah for calling us the Great Satan. It's like he put the evil eye on us and we shrank. Seriously, he really stuck it to us somehow. Don't live in a dream world, Harry. We still need you down here. She goes out to the lot where a quartet of female teenagers have showed up, all in jackets of stonewashed denim. Who knows, even teenagers these days have money enough for a Toyota. Maybe it's an all-girl rock band shopping for a van to tour in. Harry wanders into the office where the visiting accountants are nesting day after day in piles of paper. The one in charge has a rubbery, tired face with dark rings under his eyes, and the assistant seems to be a kind of moron, a simpleton at speaking anyway, with not enough back to his head. As if to make up for any deficiency, he always wears a clean white shirt with a tight necktie pinned to his chest with a tie-clip. Ah, the one in charge says, just the guy we need. Does the name Angus Barfield mean anything to you? The rings under his eyes are so deep and deeply bruised they go all the way around his sockets. He looks like a raccoon. Though his face shows a lot of wear, his hair is black as shoe polish, and lies as flat on his head as if painted in place. These accountants have to be tidy, all those numbers they write down, thousands and millions, and never a 5 that could be confused with a 3 or a 7 with a 1. As he cocks a ringed eye at Harry, waiting for an answer, his rubbery mouth slides around in a restless wise-guy motion. No, Harry says. And yet, wait, there's a faint bell. Barfield. A good guy for you to know, the accountant says, with a sly grimace and twist of his lips. From December to April, he was buying a Toyota a month. He checks a paper under his shirt-sleeved forearm. He has very long black hairs on his wrists. A Corolla 4-door, a Tercel 5-speed hatchback, a Camry wagon, a deluxe 2-passenger 4Runner, and in April he really went fancy and took on a Supra Turbo with a sport roof to the tune of $25,700. Totals up to just under $75,000. All in the same name and the same address on Willow Street. Where's Willow? That's one of the side streets up above Locust, you know. The area's gotten kind of trendy. Locust, Harry repeats, struggling to recall. He has heard the odd name Angus before from Nelson's lips, going off to a party in North Brewer. Single white male, excellent credit ratings, not much of a haggler, paid list price every time. The only trouble with him as a customer, the accountant says, is according to city records he's been dead for 6 months. Died before Christmas. He purses his lips into a little bunch under one nostril and lifts his eyebrows so high his nostrils dilate in sympathy. I got it, Harry says, with a jarring pounce of his heart. That's Slim. Angus Barfield was the real name of a guy everybody called Slim. He was a gay, I guess, about my son's age. Had a good job in downtown Brewer. Administered one of those HUD job training programs for high school dropouts. He was a trained psychologist, I think Nelson once told me. The moronic assistant, who has been listening with the staring effort of a head that can only hold one thing at a time, giggles. The humor of insanity spills over onto psychologists. The other twists up the lower part of his face in a new way, as if demonstrating knots. Bank loan officers love government employees, he says. They're sure and steady, see? Since the man seems to expect it, Harry nods, and the accountant dramatically slaps the tidy chaos of papers spread out on the desk. December to April, Brewer Trust extended 5 car loans to this Angus Barfield, made over to Springer Motors. How could they to the same guy? Common sense. Since computers, my friend, common sense has gone out the window. It's joined your Aunt Matilda's ostrich feather hat. The auto loan department of a bank is just tiddlywinks. The computer checked his credit and liked it, and the loan was approved. The checks were cashed but never showed up in the company credits. We think your pal Lyle opened a dummy somewhere. The man stabs a stack of bank statements with a finger. It has black hairs between the knuckles and bends back so far Rabbit winces and looks away. This rubbery guy is one of those born teachers Rabbit has instinctively avoided all his life. Let me put it like this. A computer is like a Frenchman. It seems real smart until you know the language. Once you know the language, you realize it's dumb as hell. Quick, sure, but quick ain't the same as smart. But, Harry gropes to say, but for Lyle and Nelson, Lyle especially, to use poor Slim's name in a scam like this when he had just died, when he was just about buried, would they have actually been so hard-hearted? The accountant slumps a little under the weight of such naivete. These were hungry boys. The dead have no feelings that I've heard about. The guy's credit hadn't been pulled from the computer, and between these loans from Brewer Trust and the diddled inventory with Mid-Atlantic Toyota, some $200,000 was skimmed from this operation that we can verify so far. That's a lot of Toll House cookies. The assistant giggles again. Rabbit, hearing the sum, goes cold with the premonition that this debt will swallow him. Here amid all these papers arrayed on the desk, where he himself used to work, keeping a roll of lifesavers in the left-hand middle drawer, a fatal hole is being hatched. He taps his jacket pocket for the reassuring lump of the nitrostat bottle. He'll take one as soon as he gets away. The night he and Prue fucked, both of them weary and half crazy with their fates, the old bed creaking beneath them had seemed another kind of nest, an interwoven residue of family fortunes. Ma Springer's musty old lady scent released from the mattress by this sudden bouncing where for years she had slept alone. An essence of old mothballed blankets stored in attic cedar chests among plush-bound family albums and broken cane-seated rockers and veiled hats in round hat boxes. An essence arising not only from the abused bed, but from the old sewing apparatus stored here, and Fred's forgotten neckties in the closet, and the dust balls beneath the venerable four-poster. All those family traces descended to this coupling by thunder and lightning. It was now as if it had never been. He and Prue are severely polite with each other, and Janice, evermore the working girl, has ceased to create many occasions when the households mingle. He and Prue are severely polite with each other, and Janice, evermore the working girl, has ceased to create many occasions when the households mingle. The Father's Day cookout was an exception, and the children were tired and cranky and bitten by the time the grilled hamburgers were finally ready to be consumed. Harry laughs, as idiotically as the assistant accountant. Poor Slim, he says, trying to harmonize with the head accountant's slanginess. Some pal Lyle turned out to be, buying him all those wheels he didn't need. On July 4th, for Judy's sake, he marches in a Mount Judge parade. Her Girl Scout troop is in it, and the troop leader's husband, Clarence Eifert, is on the organizing committee. They needed a man tall enough to be Uncle Sam, and Judy told Mrs. Eifert that her grandfather was wonderfully tall. Actually, 6'3" isn't tall by today's standards. You'd be a dwarf in the NBA at that height. But several members of the committee, a generation older than Mr. Eifert, remembered Rabbit Angstrom from his high school glory days and became enthusiastic, even though Harry lives now in Penn Park on the other side of Brewer. He was a Mount Judge boy and something of a hero once, and though he has become more corpulent than our national symbol should be, has the right fair skin and pale blue eyes and a good soldierly bearing. He served during Korea. He did his bit. The bell-bottomed trousers with their broad red stripes have to be left unbuttoned at the stomach, but since they are held up by tricolor suspenders and a pale blue vest patterned in stars comes down over the belt area, it doesn't much matter. Harry and Janice fuss a good deal at the costume in the week before the 4th. They actually go buy a formal shirt with French cuffs and a wing collar to go with the floppy red cravat, and decide that somehow his suede hush-puppies go better with the red-striped trousers, look more like boots, than the formal black shoes he keeps for weddings and funerals. The swallowtail coat, a wool darker blue than the vest, with 3 unbuttonable brass buttons on both sides, fits well enough, but the fuzzy flared top hat with its hatband of big silver stars perches on his high head unsteadily, a touch tight with the white nylon wig, so it feels like it might totter and fall off. He never did like hats. Janice bites the tip of her tongue thoughtfully. "Do you need the wig? Your hair's so pale anyway." "But it's cut too short for Uncle Sam. I would have let it grow out if I'd known." "Well," she says, "why wouldn't Uncle Sam have a modern haircut? He's not dead, is he?" He tests the hat without the wig and says, "It does feel better, actually. And frankly, Harry, the wig on you is somehow alarming. It makes you look like a very big red-faced woman." "Look, I'm doing this for our granddaughter. There's no need to get insulting." "It's not insulting. It's interesting. I never saw your feminine side before. I bet you would have made a nicer woman than either your mother or Mim. They should have been men, both of them. Mom was mean to Janice from the moment he first brought her home from Kroll's, and Mim once stole Charlie Stavros from her, or so Janice interpreted it. I'm getting hot and itchy in this outfit, Harry says. Let's try the goatee." The goatee in place, Janice says, "Oh, yes, it slims your face right down. I wonder why you never grew a beard." There is this subtle past tense that keeps creeping into her remarks about him. "Mr. Lister is growing a beard now, and it makes him look a lot less doleful. He has these sagging jowls." I don't want to hear about that creep. He adds, "When I talk, the stickum doesn't feel like enough." "It must be. It's gone through a lot of other parades." "That's its problem, you dope. Is there any way to renew the stickum?" "Just don't move your chin too much. I could call up Doris Eberhardt. When she was married to Kaufman, they were big into amateur theatricals." "Don't get that pushy bitch on my case. Maybe somebody at the parade will have some spare stickum." But the mustering of the parade is a confused and scattered business, held on the grounds of the old Mount Judge High School, now the junior high school, and slated to be torn down because of the asbestos in it everywhere and the insurance rates on the wooden floors. When Harry went there, they all just breathed the asbestos and took their chances on the floors catching fire. There are marching bands and antique cars and 4-H floats and veterans in their old uniforms all milling around on the asphalt of the parking lot and the brown grass of the baseball outfield, with the only organizing principle provided by men and women in green T-shirts stenciled Mount Judge Independence Day Committee, and those plastic truck driver caps with a bill in front and a panel of mesh at the back. Looking to be told where to go, Rabbit wanders in this area where long ago he had roamed with wet-combed, duck-tailed hair and a corduroy shirt tight across his back, the sleeves folded back, and, out of basketball season, a cigarette pack squaring the shirt pocket. He expects to come across his old girlfriend, Mary Ann, as she had been then, in saddle shoes and white socks and a short pleated cheerleader's skirt, her calves straight and smooth and round-muscled between the skirt and the socks, and her face, with the dimple in one cheek and the touch of acne on her forehead, springing into joy at the sight of him. Instead, strange people with puzzled 80s faces keep asking directions because he is dressed as Uncle Sam and should know. He has to keep telling them he doesn't know anything. The old high school, built in the 20s of orange brick, had a tall windowless wall at the back, across from a board and tar paper equipment shed long since torn down. And this black and gravelly area has profound associations for him, a power in its mute bricks and secluding space. For it was here, after school and until twilight called you home, that the more questing and footloose of the town's children tended to gather, girls as well as boys, hanging out, shooting baskets at the hoop attached to the blank brickwork, flat on the wall like those in the gym in Oriole, necking against the torn tar-paper boards of the equipment shed, talking, the girls held by the boys' braced arms as in a row of soft cages, teasing, passing secrets, feeling their way, avoiding going home, so that the gritty leftover space here behind the school was charged with the solemn electricity, the questing energy of adolescence. Now in this area, repaved and cleaned up, the shed and backboards gone, Rabbit comes upon Judy's Girl Scout troop, some of them in uniform and some posed in costume on a flatbed truck, a float illustrating liberty, the tallest and prettiest girl in a white bedsheet and spiked crown, holding a big bronze book and gilded torch, and others grouped around her cardboard pedestal with their faces painted red and brown and black and yellow to represent the faces of mankind. The faces painted because there aren't any Indian or Negro or Asian little girls in Mount Judge, at least any that have joined the Girl Scouts. Judy is one of those in badged and braided khaki uniform around the truck, and she is so amazed to see her grandfather in his towering costume that she takes his hand as if to tie him to the earth, to reality. He has difficulty bending his head to see her, for fear that his top hat might fall off. As if addressing the distant backstop of the baseball diamond, he asks her, "How does the goatee look? The little beard, Judy?" "Fine, Grandpa. You scared me at first. I didn't know who you were." "It feels to me like it might fall off any second." "It doesn't look that way. I love the big stripy pants. Doesn't the vest squeeze your tummy?" "That's the least of my problems. Judy, listen. Think you could do me a favor? It just occurred to me they make a Scotch tape now that's sticky on both sides. If I gave you a couple dollars, think you could run over to the little store across Central and get me some?" Always, under names and managements that shift with the years, there has been a store across from the school to sell its students bubble gum and candy and cap guns and caps and tablets and cigarettes and skin magazines and whatever else young people thought they had to have. With difficulty, keeping his head stiffly upright, he digs through the layers of his costume to his wallet in a pouchy side pocket of the striped pants, and, holding it up to his face, digs out 2 $1 bills. Just in case, he adds another. Things these days always cost more than he expects. "Suppose it's not open because of the holiday?" "It'll be open. It was always open." "Suppose the parade starts? I got to be on the truck." "No, it won't. The parade can't start without me. Come on, Judy. Think of all I've done for you. Think of how I saved you on the boat that time. Who got me into this damn parade in the first place? You did." He doesn't dare look down lest his hat come off, but he can hear from her voice she is near tears. Her hair makes a reddish blur in the bottom of his vision. "Okay, I'll try, but—" "Remember," he says, and as his chin stiffens in admonishment, he feels his goatee loosen. "Sticky on both sides. Scotch makes it. Run, honey." His heart is racing. He gropes through his clothes to make sure he remembered to bring the little bottle of nitroglycerin. He finds its life-giving nugget deep in the pouchy pocket. When he brings his fingers to his face to tamp down the goatee, he sees they are trembling. If his goatee doesn't stick, he won't be Uncle Sam, and the entire parade will flounder. It will jam up here on the school grounds forever. He walks around with little steps, ignoring everybody, trying to quiet his heart. This is aggravating. When Judy at last comes back, panting, she tells him, "They were dumb. They mostly sell only food now, junky things like cheese doodles. The only Scotch tape they have is sticky on one side only. I got some anyway. Was that okay?" Drum rolls sound on the parking lot, scattered at first, a few kids impatiently clowning around, and then in unison, gathering mass, an implacable momentum. The motors of antique cars and trucks bearing floats are starting up, filling the holiday air with blue exhaust. "Okay," Harry says, unable to look down at his granddaughter lest his hat fall off, pocketing the tape and the change from $3 pressed upon him from below. Estranged from his costumed body, he feels on stilts, his feet impossibly small. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I did the best I could." Judy's little light voice, out of sight beneath him, wobbles and crackles with tears like water sloshing in sun. "You did great," he lies. A frantic, stocky woman in a green committee T-shirt and truck driver hat comes and hustles him away, to the head of the parade, past floats and drum and bugle corps, Model A Fords, and civic leaders in neckties and a white limousine. A Mount Judge patrol car with its blue light twirling and its siren silent will be the spearhead, then Harry at a distance. As if he doesn't know the route. As a child he used to participate in parades, in the crowd of town kids riding bicycles with red, white, and blue crepe paper threaded through the spokes. Down Central to Market, a block short of 422, through the heart of the little slanting diagonal downtown, then left and uphill along Potter Avenue, through blocks of brick semi-detached houses up on their terraced lawns behind the retaining walls, then downhill past Kegerais Alley, as they used to call it, Kegerais Street it is now, with its small former hosiery factories and machine shops renamed Linux and Data Development and Business Logistical Systems, up to Jackson, the high end, a block from his old house, and on down to Joseph and past the big Baptist church, and sharp right on Myrtle past the post office and the gaunt old Oddfellows Hall to end at the reviewing stand set up in front of the Borough Hall, in the little park that was full in the 60s of kids smoking pot and playing guitars, but now, on a normal day, holds just a few old retired persons and homeless drifters with $1,000,000 tans. The green-chested woman, along with a marshal with a big cardboard badge, a squinty-stooped jeweler called Himmelreich. Rabbit was in school a few grades behind his father, whom everybody called a pansy. Make sure he delays enough to let a distance build between him and the lead car, so Uncle Sam doesn't look too associated with the police. Immediately next in the parade is the white limousine carrying the Mount Judge Burgess, and what borough councilmen weren't off in the Poconos or at the Jersey Shore. From further behind come the sounds of the drum and bugle corps and some bagpipers hired from Chester County, and the scratchy pop tunes playing on the floats to help illustrate liberty and the spirit of 1776, and One World, Un Mundo, and Head, Heart, Hands, and Health. And at the tail end a local rock singer doing ecstatic imitations of Presley and Orbison and Lennon, while a megawatt electric fan loudly blows on all the amplifying equipment stacked on his flatbed truck. But up front, at the head of the parade, it is oddly silent, hushed. And what a precarious, weird feeling it is for Harry at last to put his suede-booted feet on the yellow double line of the town's main street and start walking. He feels giddy, ridiculous, enormous. Behind him there is the white limousine purring along in low gear, so he cannot stop walking. And far ahead, so far ahead it twinkles out of sight around corners and bends in the route, the police car. But immediately ahead there is nothing but the eerie emptiness of normally busy Central Street under a dazed July sky, blue above the telephone wires. He is the traffic, his solitary upright body. The stilled street has its lunar details, its pockmarks, its scars, its ancient metal lids. The tremor in his heart and hands becomes an exalted sacrificial feeling as he takes those few steps into the asphalt void, rimmed at this end of the route with only a few spectators, a few bare bodies in shorts and sneakers and tinted shirts along the curb. They call to him. They wave ironically, calling "Yay!" at the idea of Uncle Sam, this walking flag, this incorrigible taxer and frisky international mischief-maker. He has nothing to do but wave back, carefully nodding so as not to spill his hat or shake loose his goatee. The crowd, as it thickens, calls out more and more his name. "Harry," or "Rabbit," "Hey, Rabbit," "Hey, Hotshot." They remember him. He hasn't heard his old nickname so often in many years. Nobody in Florida uses it, and his grandchildren would be puzzled to hear it. But suddenly from these curbstones there it is again, alive, affectionate. This crowd seems a strung-out, recycled version of the crowd that used to jam the old auditorium gym Tuesday and Friday nights, basketball nights, in the dead of the winter, making their own summer heat with their bodies, so that out on the floor sweat kept burning your eyes and trickling down from under your hair, behind your ears, diagonally sliding down your neck. Now the sweat builds under his wool swallowtail coat, on his back and his belly, which indeed is squeezed, as Judy said, and under his hat, even without the wig. Thank God Janice got him out of that. She isn't always a dumb mutt. His sweat, as with increasing ease and eagerness he waves at the crowd that clusters at the corners and in the shade of the Norway maples, and on the sandstone retaining walls and terraced lawns up into the cool shadow of the porches, loosens his goatee, undermines the adhesive. He feels one side of it softly separate from his chin, and without breaking stride, Uncle Sam has a bent-kneed, cranky stride, not quite Harry's loping own, he digs out the Scotch tape from the pouchy pocket and tears off an inch with the tab of red plaid paper. It wants to stick to his fingers. After several increasingly angry flicks, it flutters away onto the street. Then he pulls off another piece, which he presses onto his own face and the detaching edge of synthetic white beard. The tape holds, though it must make a rectangular gleam on his face. The spectators who see him improvise this repair cheer. He takes to doffing his tall, heavy hat with a cautious bow to either side, and this stirs more applause and friendly calling. The crowd he sees from behind his wave, his smile, his adhesive gleam amazes him. The people of Mount Judge are dressed for summer with a bareness that since Harry's childhood has crept up from children into the old. White-haired women sit in their aluminum lawn chairs down by the curb, dressed like fat babies in checks and frills, their shapeless veined legs cheerfully protruding. Middle-aged men have squeezed their keg-like thighs into bicycle shorts meant for boys. Young mothers have come from their backyard above-ground swimming pools in bikinis and high-sided twists of spandex that leave half their buttocks and breasts exposed. On their cocked hips they hold heat-flushed babies in nothing but diapers and rubber pants. There seem so many young, babies, tots, a bubbling up of generation on generation since the town brought him forth. Then it was full of the old. As he walked to school of a morning, severe and scolding women would come out of their houses, shaking brooms and wearing thick, dark stockings and house dresses with buttons all down the front. Now a cheerful, innocent froth of flesh lines Jackson Road. Bare knees are bunched like grapes, and barrels of naked brown shoulders hulk in the dappled curbside shade. There are American flags on gilded sticks, and balloons in all colors, even metallic balloons shaped like hearts and pillows, held in hands and tied to bushes, to the handles of strollers containing yet more babies. A spirit of indulgence, a conspiring to be amused, surrounds and upholds his parade as he leads it down the stunning emptiness at the center of the familiar slanting streets. Harry puts some Scotch tape on the other side of his goatee, and out of the same pocket fishes his pill vial and pops a nitrostat. The uphill section of the route tested him, and now turning downhill jars his heels and knees. When he draws too close to the cop car up ahead, carbon monoxide washes into his lungs. Mingled music from behind pushes him on. The gaps of American patrol are filled with strains of yesterday. He concentrates on the painted yellow line, besmirched here and there by skid marks, dotted for stretches where passing is permitted, but mostly double like the inflexible old trolley tracks long buried or torn up for scrap. Cameras click at him. Voices call his several names. They know him, but he sees no face he knows, not one. Not even Prue's wry, red-haired heart shape, or Roy's black-eyed stare, or Janice's brown little stubborn nut of a face. They said they would be at the corner of Joseph and Myrtle, but here near the Borough Hall the crowd is thickest, the summer-cooked bodies 4 and 5 deep, and his loved ones have been swallowed up. The whole town he knew has been swallowed up by the decades, but another has taken its place, younger, more naked, less fearful, better. And it still loves him, as it did when he would score 42 points for them in a single home game. He is a legend, a walking cloud. Inside him a droplet of explosive has opened his veins like flower petals uncurling in the sun. His eyes are burning with sweat or something allergic. His head aches under the pressure cooker of the tall top hat. The greenhouse effect, he thinks, the hole in the ozone. When the ice in Antarctica goes, we'll all be drowned. Scanning the human melt for the glint of a familiar face, Harry sees instead a beer can being brazenly passed back and forth, the flash of a myopic child's earnest spectacles, a silver hoop earring in the lobe of a Hispanic-looking girl. Along the march he noticed a few black faces in the crowd, as cheerful and upholding as the rest, and some Orientals, an adopted Vietnamese orphan, a chunky Filipino wife. From far back in the still unwinding parade, the bagpipers keen a Highland killing song, and the rock impersonator whimpers, "Imagine all the people." And closer to the front, on a scratchy tape through crackling speakers, Kate Smith belts out, dead as she is, dragged into the grave by sheer gangrenous weight, "God bless America," to the oceans white with foam. Harry's eyes burn, and the impression, giddily, as if he has been lifted up to survey all human history, grows upon him, making his heart thump worse and worse, that all in all, this is the happiest fucking country the world has ever seen. It was the sort of foolish revelation he might have once shared with Thelma, in the soft-speaking shamelessness that follows making love. Thelma was suddenly dead. Dead of kidney failure, thrombocytopenia, and endocarditis toward the end of July, as the cool dawn of another hot blue-gray day broke on the ornamental roof-level brickwork opposite St. Joseph's Hospital in Brewer. Poor Thelma, her body had just been plain worn out by her long struggle. Ronnie tried to keep her at home to the end, but that last week she was too much to handle. Hallucinations, raving, sarcastic anger, quite a lot of anger at Ron of all people, who had been so devoted a husband, after being such a scapegrace in his young unmarried days. She was only 55, a year younger than Harry, 2 years older than Janice. She died the same week the DC-10, bringing people from Denver to Philadelphia by way of Chicago, crashed in Sioux City, Iowa, trying to land at 200 miles an hour, running on no controls but the thrust of the 2 remaining engines, cartwheeling on the runway, breaking up in a giant fireball, and yet well over 100 surviving, some of them dangling upside down from the seat belts in a section of fuselage, some of them walking away and getting lost in the cornfields next to the runway. It seemed to Rabbit the first piece of news that summer that wasn't a 20th anniversary of something. Of Woodstock, the Manson murders, Chappaquiddick, the moon landing. The TV news has been full of resurrected footage. The funeral service is in a sort of no-brand-name church about a mile beyond Arrowdale. Looking for it, Harry and Janice got lost and wound up at the mall in Maiden Springs, where a 6-theater Cineplex advertised on its crammed display board, "Honey, I Shrunk Batman Ghost Bus 2 Karate Kid 3 Dead Poets Great Balls." The lazy girl in the booth didn't know where the church might be, nor did the pimply usher inside, in the big empty scarlet lobby smelling of buttered popcorn and melting M&Ms. Harry was angry with himself. All those times he sneaked out to Arrowdale to visit Thelma, now he can't find her goddamn church. When finally, hot, embarrassed, and furious at each other's incompetence, the Angstroms arrive, the church is just a plain raw building, a warehouse with windows and a stump of an anodized aluminum steeple, set in a treeless acre of red soil sown skimpily with grass and crisscrossed by car ruts. Inside, the walls are cinder block, and the light through the tall, clear windows bald and merciless. Folding chairs do instead of pews, and childish felt banners hang from the metal beams overhead, showing crosses, trumpets, crowns of thorns mixed in with biblical verse numbers. Mark 15:32. Revelations 1:10, John 19:2. The minister wears a brown suit and necktie and shirt with an ordinary collar, and looks rather mussed and breathless, like the plump young manager of an appliance store who sometimes has to help out in handling the heavy cartons. His voice is amplified by a tiny stalk of a microphone almost invisible at the oak lectern. He talks of Thelma as a model housewife, mother, churchgoer, sufferer. The description describes no one. It is like a dress with no one in it. The minister senses this, for he goes on to mention her special sense of humor, her particular way of regarding things which enabled her to bear herself so courageously throughout her long struggle with her physical affliction. During a pastoral visit to Thelma in her last tragic week in the hospital, the minister had ventured to speculate with her on the eternal mystery of why the Lord visits afflictions upon some and not upon others, and cures some and lets many remain uncured. Even in the divine gospel, let us remind ourselves this is so, for what of the many lepers and souls possessed who did not happen to be placed in Jesus' path, or were not aggressive enough to press themselves forward in the vast crowds that flocked to him on the plain and on the mount, at Capernaum and at Galilee? And what was Thelma's reply? She said, there in that hospital bed of pain and suffering, that she guessed she deserved it as much as the next. This woman was truly humble, truly uncomplaining. On an earlier, less stressful occasion, the minister recalls, with a quickening of his voice that indicates an anecdote is coming, he was visiting her in her immaculate home, and she had explained her physical affliction to him as a minor misunderstanding, as a matter of some tiny wires in her system being crossed. Then she had suggested, with that gentle, humorous expression that all of us here who loved her remember, and yet in all grievous seriousness as well, that perhaps God was responsible only for what we ourselves could experience and see, and not responsible for anything at the microscopic level. He looks up, uncertain of the effect this reminiscence has made, and the little congregation of mourners, perhaps hearing Thelma's voice in the odd remark, and thus enabled to conjure up the something school-teacherish and sardonic and strict in her living manner, or perhaps sensing the minister's need to be rescued from the specter of unjustifiable suffering, politely titters. With relief, the brown-suited man, like a talk-show host wrapping up, rolls on to the rote assurances, the psalm about green pastures, the verses from Ecclesiastes about a time for everything, the hymn that says, "Now the day is over." Harry sits there beside snuffly Janice in her policeman's outfit, thinking of the wanton, naked Thelma he knew. How little she had to do with the woman the minister described. But maybe the minister's Thelma was as real as Harry's. Women are actresses, tuning their part to each little audience. Her part with him was to adore him, to place her body at his service as if disposing of it. Her body was ill and sallow and held death within it like a silky black box. There was a faint insult, a kind of dismissal, in her attitude of helpless captivity to the awkward need to love. He could not love her as she did him. There was a satisfying self-punishment in his relative distraction, an irony she relished. Yet however often he left her, she never wanted him to leave. The glazed ghost of her leans up against him when he stands for the blessing, stands close to his chest with sour milk breath silently begging him not to go. Janice snuffles again, but Harry keeps his own grief for Thelma tight against his heart, knowing Janice doesn't want to see it. Outside, in the embarrassing sunlight, Webb Murkett, his face smilingly creased more deeply than ever, a cigarette still dangling from his long upper lip like a camel's, goes from group to group introducing his new wife, a shy girl in her 20s, younger than Nelson, younger than Annabelle, a fluffy small blonde dressed in dark ruffles and shaped like a seal, like a teenage swimming champ with no pronounced indentations. Webb does like them zoftig. Harry feels sorry for her, dragged up to this religious warehouse to bury the wife of an old golf partner of her husband's. Cindy, Webb's last wife, whom Harry adored not so many years ago, is also here, alone, looking dumpy and irritated and unsteady on black heels, skimpy as sandals, as she takes a pose on the thickly grassed ruts of red earth that do for a church parking lot. While Janice sticks with Webb and his bride, Harry gallantly goes over to Cindy, standing there like a lump, squinting in the hot, hazed sun. "Hi," he says, wondering how she could let herself go so badly. She has taken on the standard Diamond County female build, bosom like a shelf and ass like you're carrying your own bench around with you. Her dear little precise-featured face, in the old days enigmatic in its boyish pertness, with its snub nose and wide-apart eyes, is framed by fat and underlined by chins. She has no neck, like those Russian dolls that nest one inside the other. Her hair that used to be cut short has been teased and permed into that big-headed look young women favor now. It adds to her bulk. "Harry, how are you?" Her voice has a funereal caution, and she extends a soft hand, wide as a bear's paw, for him to shake. He takes it in his, but also under cover of the sad occasion, bends down and plants a kiss on her damp and ample cheek. Her look of irritated lumpiness slightly eases. "Isn't it awful about Thel?" she asks. "Yeah," he agrees, "but it was coming a long time. She saw it coming." He figures it's all right to suggest he knew the dead woman's mind. Cindy was there in the Caribbean the night they swapped. He had wanted Cindy and wound up with Thelma. Now both are beyond desiring. "You know, don't you," Cindy says. "I mean, you sense when the time is near if you're sick like that. You sense everything." Rabbit remembers a little cross in the hollow of her throat you could see when she wore a bathing suit, and how, like a lot of people of her generation, she was soft on spookiness in general. Astrology, premonitions, though not as bad as Buddy Inglefinger's girlfriend Valerie, a real old-style hippie, 6 feet tall and dripping beads. "Maybe women more than men," he says to Cindy tactfully.
He lurches a bit deeper into frankness. I've had some physical problems lately, and they give me the feeling I've walked through my entire life in a daze. This is too deep for her, too confessional. There was always in his relations with Cindy a wall, just behind her bright butterscotch-brown eyes, a barrier where the signals stopped. Silly Cindy, Thelma called her. Yet Rabbit had seen Polaroids sneaking into the Merkits' bedroom one drunken night, proving that Cindy functioned. She fucked, she blew. Now indeed she did look silly and unhappy. "Somebody told me," he tells her, "you're with a boutique over in that new mall near Oriole." "I'm thinking of quitting, actually. Whatever I earn is taken off Webb's alimony, so why should I bother? You can see how welfare mothers get that way." "Well," he says, "a job gets you out in the world. Meet people. Meet a guy, get married again is his unspoken thought. But who would want to hitch up with such a slab of beef? She'd sink any sunfish you'd try to sail with her now." "I'm thinking of maybe becoming a physical therapist. Another girl at the boutique is learning to do holistic massage." "Sounds nice," Harry says, which holds. This is crude enough that she dares begin, "You and Thelma," but she stops and looks at the ground. "Yeah?" That old barrier keeps him from encouraging her. She is not the audience for which he wants to play the part of Thelma's bereft lover. "You'll miss her, I know," Cindy says weakly. He feigns innocence. "Frankly, Janice and I haven't been seeing that much of the Harrisons lately. Ronnie's resigned from the club, too much money, he says, and I've hardly had a chance this summer to get over there myself. It's not the same, the old gang is gone, a lot of young twerps. They hit the ball a mile and win all the weekend sweeps. My daughter-in-law uses the pool with the kids." "I hear you're back at the lot." "Yeah," he says, in case she knows anyway. "Nelson screwed up. I'm just holding the fort." He wonders if he is saying too much, but she is looking past him. "I must go, Harry. I can't stand another second of watching Webb cavort with that simpering, ridiculous baby doll of his. He's over 60. The lucky stiff, he made it to 60. In the little silence her indignant, sharp remark imposes on the air, an airplane goes over, dragging its high, dull roar behind it. With a smile not fully friendly, he tells her, "You've all kept him young," recalling those Polaroids. A woman you've endured such a gnawing of desire for, you can't help bearing a little grudge against when the ache is gone. A number of people are making their escapes, and Harry thinks he should go over and say a word to Ronnie. His old nemesis is standing in a loose group with his 3 sons and their women. Alex, the computer whiz, has a close haircut and a nerdy, nearsighted look. Georgie has a would-be actor's long, pampered hair, and the coat and tie he put on for his mother's funeral look like a costume. Ron Jr. has the pleasantest face, Thelma's smile, and the muscle and tan of an outdoor worker. Shaking their hands, Harry startles them by knowing their names. When you're sexually involved with a woman, some of the magic spills down into her children that she also spread her legs for. "How's Nelson doing?" Ron Jr. asks him, from the look on his face not trying to be nasty. It must have been this boy, a round brewer as he is, who told Thelma about Nelson's habit. Harry answers him man to man. "Good, Ron. He went through the detox treatment for a month, and now he's living with about 20 other, substance abusers at what they call a concept house, a halfway house in North Philly. He's got a volunteer job working with inner-city kids at a playground." "That's great, Mr. Angstrom. Nelson's a great guy, basically." "I don't go visit him anymore. I couldn't stand this family therapy they try to give you, but his mother and Prue swear he loves it, working with these tough black kids." Georgie, the prettiest boy and Thelma's favorite, has been overhearing and volunteers, "The only trouble with Nelson, he's too sensitive. He lets things get to him. In show business, you learn to let it slide off your back. You know, fuck 'em. Otherwise, you'd kill yourself." He pats the back of his hairdo. Alex, the oldest, adds in his nerdy, prim way, "Well, I tell you, the drugs out in California were getting to me. That's why I was happy when this job in Fairfax came through. I mean, everybody does it. All weekend they do it, on the beaches, on the throughways. Everybody's stoned. How can you raise a family, or save any money?" Her boys are men now, with flecks of gray hair and little wise wrinkles around their mouths, with wives and small children, Thelma's grandchildren, looking to their fathers for shelter in the weedy tangle of the world. Her boys look more mature in Harry's eyes than Ronnie, in whom he must always see the obnoxious brat from Wenrich Alley, and the loud-mouthed locker-room show-off of high school days. People he once loved slide from him, but Ronnie is always there, like the smelly underside of his own body, like the jockey underpants that get dirty every day. Ronnie is playing the grieving widower to a T. He looks like he's been through a washer, his eyelashes poking white from his tear-reddened lids, his kinky brass-colored hair reduced to gray wisps above his droopy ears. Rabbit tries to overcome his old aversion, their old rivalry, by giving the other man's hand an expressive squeeze and saying, "Really sorry." But the old hostile devil lights up in Harrison's face, once meaty and now drawn and hollowed out and stringy. With a glance at his sons and a small over-there jab of his head, he takes Harry's arm in a grip purposely too hard and leads him out of earshot, a few steps away on the rutted, dried mud. He says to him, in the hurried, confidential voice of men together in an athletic huddle, "You think I don't know you were banging Thel for years? I've never much thought about what you know or don't know, Ronnie. You son of a bitch, that night we swapped down in the islands was just the beginning, wasn't it? You kept seeing her up here. Ron, I thought you said you knew. You should have asked Thelma if you were curious. I didn't want to hassle her. She was fighting to live, and I loved her. Toward the end we talked about it." "So you did hassle her?" "She wanted to clear the slate. You son of a bitch, the old master. You're the coldest, most selfish bastard I ever met." "Why? What makes me so bad? Maybe she wanted me. Maybe the favors were mutual." Over Ronnie's shoulder, Harry sees mourners waiting to say goodbye, hesitant, conscious of the heat of this hurried conversation. Harrison has become pink in the face, and perhaps Rabbit has too. He says, "Ronnie, people are watching. This isn't the time. There won't be another time. I don't ever want to see you again as long as I live. You disgust me." "Yeah, and you disgust me. You always have, Ron. You got a prick where your head ought to be. Who can blame her if Thelma gave herself a little vacation from eating your shit now and then?" Ronnie's face is quite pink, and his eyes are watering. He has never let go of Harry's forearm, as if this hold is his last warm contact with his dead wife. His voice lowers into a new intensity. Harry has to bend his head to hear. "I don't give a fuck you banged her. What kills me is you did it without giving a shit. She was crazy for you, and you just lapped it up. You narcissistic cocksucker. She wasted herself on you. She went against everything she wanted to believe in, and you didn't even appreciate it. You didn't love her, and she knew it. She told me herself. She told me in the hospital, asking my forgiveness." Ronnie takes breath to go on, but tears block his throat. Rabbit's own throat aches, thinking of Thelma and Ronnie at the last, her betraying her lover when her body had no more love left in it. "Ronnie," he whispers, "I did appreciate her. I did. She was a fantastic lay." "You cocksucker," is all Ronnie can get out, repetitively, and then they both turn to face the mourners waiting to pay their respects, and climb into their cars and salvage what is left of this hot, hazy Saturday, with lawns to mow and gardens to weed all across Diamond County. Janice and Webb are among those staring. They must guess what the conversation has been about. In fact, most of those here must guess, even the three sons. Though he had always been discreet on his visits to Arrowdale, hiding his Toyota in her garage and never getting caught in bed with her by a sick child returning early from school, or a repairman letting himself in an unlocked door, these things have a way of getting out into the air. Like a tire, it needs only a pinhole of a leak. People sense it. Word has got around, or it will now. Well, fuck 'em, like Georgie said. Fuck 'em all, including Webb's child bride, who, from the shape of her, might be pregnant. That Webb, what a character. A nice thing happens. Ronnie and Harry, Harrison and Angstrom, with a precision as if practiced, execute a crisscross. They smile, despite their pink eyelids and raw throats, at the little watching crowd, and neatly cross paths as they move toward their kin. Harry toward Janice in her navy blue suit with white trim and wide shoulders, and Ronnie back to his sons and the center of his sad occasion. Once teammates, always teammates. Rabbit, remembering how Ronnie once screwed Ruth a whole weekend in Atlantic City and then bragged to him about it, can't feel sorry for him at all. "I love what you do for me, Toyota." That is the new paper banner the company has sent down to hang in the big display window. At times, standing at the window, when a cloud dense with moisture darkens the atmosphere, or an occluding truck pulls up past the yew hedge for some business at the service doors, Harry catches a sudden reflection of himself and is startled by how big he is, by how much space he is taking up on the planet. Stepping out on the empty roadway as Uncle Sam last month, he had felt so eerily tall, as if his head were a giant balloon floating above the marching music. Though his inner sense of himself is of an innocuous passive spirit, a steady small voice that doesn't want to do any harm, get trapped anywhere, or ever die, there is this other self seen from outside, a 6'3" ex-athlete weighing 230 at the least, an apparition wearing a sleek gray summer suit shining all over as if waxed, and a big head whose fluffy shadowy hair was trimmed at Sheer Joy hairstyling, unisex $15 minimum, to rest exactly on the ears, a fearsome bulk with eyes that see and hands that grab and teeth that bite, a body eating enough at one meal to feed 3 Ethiopians for a day, a shameless consumer of gasoline, electricity, newspapers, hydrocarbons, carbohydrates, a boss in a shiny suit. His recent heart troubles have become, like his painfully and expensively crowned back teeth, part of his respectability's full-blown equipage. Harry needs a good self-image today, for the lot is going to be visited at 11 by a representative of the Toyota Corporation, a Mr. Natsumi Shimada, hitherto manifested only as a careful signature. Each letter individually formed, on creamy stiff stationery from the American Toyota Motor Sales headquarters in Torrance, California. Word of the financial irregularities anatomized by the 2 accountants Janice hired under Charlie's direction has filtered upward, higher and higher, as letters from Mid-Atlantic Toyota in Glen Burnie, Maryland, were succeeded by mail from the Toyota Motor Credit Corporation's offices in Baltimore, and then by courteous but implacable communications from Torrance itself, signed with what seems an old-fashioned, stub-tipped fountain pen by Mr. Shimada in sky-blue ink. "Nervous?" Elvira asks, sidling up beside him in a slim seersucker suit. For the hot weather, she had her hair cut short behind, exposing sexy dark brown at the back of her neck. Did Nelson used to boff her? If Prue wasn't putting out, he had to boff somebody, unless coke whores were enough, or the kid was secretly gay. Insofar as he can bear to contemplate his son's sex life, Elvira seems a little too classy, too neuter to go along with it. But maybe Harry is underestimating the amount of energy in the world. He tends to do that now that his own is sagging. "Not too," he answers. "How do I look?" "Very imposing. I like the new suit. It's kind of a gray metallic. They developed the fabric while doing the moonshots.